here's some baits that can greatly increase your chances of catching fish in the heat of the summertime. Let's talk about them. July baits. It's miserably hot. That's why I'm inside today. It's just stupid hot outside right now. But I wanted to put a video together real quick just before July starts and talk about the baits that I'm going to be using in the heat of the summer. First of all, what's going on? We got hot water. I want to talk about both southern and northern waters. Okay, so hot water in the south. We're probably right at high 80s, low 90s in surface temperature on the water. Up north, you're probably 70s, 80s. But still, the bass are going to be looking for similar things. Grass, current. And current's going to push the bait and push the fish in certain places. Up north, you get a lot of winds that come out of the same direction for a couple of days. It'll push things back into the back of pockets. I always try to pay attention to the wind 2 or 3 days before I'm trying to fish. And it'll tell me where all the stuff's going to be pushed to, where the bait's going to be pushed to, where the bass are going to follow to. And I'm always going to start in those wind-blown pockets and those wind-blown points. In the south, it's offshore stuff. Long points, steep side of points, humps, and then of course grass and current. So I'm going to look for wind current, I'm going to look for river current, and I'm going to look for grass. Anything that creates oxygen, because that water gets really, really hot and it loses its ability to hold oxygen. You got to find something that creates oxygen that'll help the fish to breathe. So that's the bulk of it. So let's talk about the different baits that I'm going to be using. I'm going to talk about 4 baits. Nope, I'm going to talk about 5 baits. So, all right, so the first one is really good. A great all-around finesse presentation for bank fishing, for pond fishing, for offshore stuff under your boat and your kayak. I mean, you just name it, and this is one of my favorite finesse techniques and has been for years. In fact, my very first instructional video was on this, and it is a drop shot rig. So a drop shot rig consists of a bait. A straight tail worm is what I like, and you can use other things, but I prefer straight tail worms. And on a small hook, either nose hooked or weedless like I have it right now, a little short leader, 12 to 18 inches, you can even be shorter than that, and some type of a weight on the bottom of that leader. So main line, hook, leader, or weight, just like that. And what it does is it allows you to drop your bait down onto the bottom, and then bring it and fish it just above the bottom to where the fish see it better, where it's out of the silt when you're on ponds. You don't have to worry about hard bottom and that kind of stuff like you do with a jig or a shaky head. And you can just drag it around like a Carolina rig, but like I said, just keep it up above the bottom and shake it and keep it in front of the fish and in the strike zone longer. That's why I love a spinning or love a drop shot. Now, rod, reel, and line. Spinning rod, 99.9% of the time. Right now I'm trying these new finesse bait casting setups and things like that, but we're not going to talk about those. But a spinning rod, the 2 that I fish drop shots with is either a medium light or a medium. Medium light's good for if I'm fishing those tiny little hooks that are nose hooked on, on the drop shot, and I don't have to worry about needing a lot of power to get the hook set. And so I'm going to throw a medium light. But 90% of the time I've got mine rigged weedless just like this. And I've got the hook, the hook's all in the bait and everything else. So you got to have enough power to be able to punch that hook through the bait and into the fish's mouth. So I like to bump it up to a medium spinning rod. The main line is going to be 20 to 30 pound braid. And I love the high vis, the flash green that Seagar has, because you can see it and you can see any light bite or any odd twitch of the line, stuff like that. And then I tie on a long leader. Usually twice the length of my rod is where I start with my leader. And it's going to be 10 to 12 pound test fluorocarbon. Sometimes 6 or 8 if it's super clear water, but I don't fish a lot of that around here. So just match your fluorocarbon to the clarity of your water and you'll be good. But like I said, the video is going to be right up here about how to rig it and how to fish it and things like that. But a drop shot is really good. And like I said, a straight tail worm is my preferred in the summertime. Whether I'm fishing a Texas rig or a Carolina rig or a drop shot, I love a straight tail worm. The next bait has got to be the most fun bait to fish in bass fishing. Of course, it's going to be a topwater bait. Of course, it's going to be a hollow body frog. I love fishing these things. Absolutely. These just happen to be 13 Fishing Trash Pandas. They're the ones that I had a little bit to do with designing them, but I also use bronze eye frogs and pad crashers and all kinds of different. I have tons of different frogs to throw and try and let the bass tell me what they like. But I always try to keep it pretty simple though. Either a pointed nose or a popping nose is what I'm looking at. A pointed nose gets through cover a whole lot better, lily pads, things like that. But if I need to call them out of cover and I'm not getting into the middle of it, I'm throwing a popping frog. So a popping frog and more sparse stuff, and a pointed nose frog to get through that thick stuff. You gotta have a heavy power rod, okay? I prefer short heavy power rod, but they're hard to find. So a 7'3" to 7'6" heavy rod with an 8:3 to 1 gear ratio reel or 8 speed reel, heavy braided line, and you're going to tie that braided line directly to the hook, to the bait. And that heavy line is going to be 50 to 65 pound braid, mainly because you've got to turn big fish out of heavy cover, and you want to have enough power to be able to do it is the reason. So I love them, absolutely love them, and I have tons of videos on them. I'm going to link the best one up there, but they're just fun to fish. And one of the biggest things, and you're going to get this from the video, but one of the things to always remember is you've got to give it some time. So the bass bites, your automatic reaction is to set the hook. What I want to see you do is when the bass bites and they blow up on that frog, give it to them for about 2 or 3 seconds and then set the hook, and you'll catch a whole lot more fish. But anyway, let's get on to the next bait. All right, so the next one is one that I use instead of a crankbait, instead of a spinner bait. It just seems to get a whole lot more bites in the multiple situations and doesn't get hung up nearly as much. So it's perfect for those bank fishermen, for those pond fishermen. And that bait is a Wobble Head. All right, so basically what it is a pivoting jig head with a creature bait on it. And I love the ones with the extra wide gap hooks. Let me pull one out over here and show you what I'm talking about. So extra wide gap hooks, just like that. But the key is the creature bait. And I want this thing to look like a bluegill, and I wanted to have it a lot of tail action, but I don't want a lot of side appendages. And so my favorite one to throw on it is a D-bomb by Missile Baits. Not a whole lot of side appendages. It's fat. It's got the shape of a bluegill, and it's just got tail action to it. I also will use a rage bug with the arms ripped off, a twin tail grub, something like that. But what I'm doing with it, and the reason it's so good, is that I'm throwing it out, let it sink to the bottom, and then I'm slowly reeling it back, trying to bump into everything. If you're in a pond, you're basically reeling it just above the silt and bumping it into rocks and bumping it into usually wood and grass and things like that, and it just doesn't get hung up. I'm not fishing it like a Texas rig. I'm not dragging it or anything else. I'm trying to make it look like a bluegill just swimming along the bottom. And I will stop it and let it hit the bottom from time to time and things like that, but slow reel and kill it. Slow reel and kill it. And I love fishing this thing deep. 20, 25, 30 feet deep sometimes, but it's great all the way up to 2 or 3 feet deep. But it's all about that slow reel back to the boat and bumping into everything you can. And then when you get bit, you give the bait to the fish. So I bow to the fish, and then I set the hook really, really hard. The rod and reel I'm using, medium heavy, fast action rod, 7'3", 7'4", somewhere around the 7-foot range. And then a good stout line, 15, 16, or 15, 17, 20-pound test fluorocarbon. I don't typically like to use 20 just because I feel like it kills the action a little bit, and it's just a little too much for this bait, but 15-pound is usually ideal. High-speed gear or gear ratio reels, 7-speed or an 8-speed reel is about all you need, and it's a blast. It's an absolute blast, and I've caught some giants over the last few weeks while I was remembering how to fish this because I hadn't fished it in a number of years. So WobbleHead, creature bait, Great, great bait. Let's talk about the next. All right, so the next one, look at this really cool box I got. I'm just trying these out. They're called the Busby boxes. But anyway, the next one is a medium to deep diving crankbait. And when I think, years ago, I made the decision to only fish one brand of crankbait just so I got to know the ins and outs of it and things like that. And I have tried a lot of different brands since that, and I do fish a lot of different brands, but I know because I've chose Strike King, I know them better than anything else. So what I typically throw is either a 3XD or a 5XD. A medium range down to 12, maybe 15 feet if you use light line, things like that. But I'm throwing that over offshore structure like humps and long points and things like that, and just covering a lot of water. And that's what's good about a crankbait. So I'm throwing it on a medium heavy moderate rod. This is a 7'4" medium heavy moderate, 12 to 15 pound test fluorocarbon. If I really want to get it down deep, I'll throw 10, but I worry about breaking off and things like that. 6 to 7 speed reel, and that's it. There's nothing special to it. Throw it out there, crank it down, bang it off the bottom, stuff like that, and you'll be able to catch fish in the summertime with it. But the best thing about it is it covers water. So I'll fish it covering a lot of water until I get bit, and then I'm going to slow down with the Dropshot or Wobble Head or any of these other baits and try to get bites, as many as I can in that area, because there's going to be a school of fish there. Last but not least is one that I don't talk a whole lot about, but I love to fish in the summertime, kind of when I'm all by myself and the camera's not rolling and things like that. But I have done a video about it, and that is a flutter spoon. Whether it be a really big one like the 6 cents one or all the way down to the smaller ones, I love to fish a flutter spoon on offshore structure. And this is mainly offshore stuff. I don't recommend this for pond fishermen or bank fishermen or people in the grass because it's going to get hung up. But when you get these schools of fish out on that offshore structure like humps and points and drop-offs and ledges and things like that, which a ledge is a drop-off, I know that. But it's really fun to get the whole school fired up with these big, giant pieces of metal. Now, you notice I don't fish the really, really big ones. This is the biggest one I fish, and it's what, 6 inches, 5 inches? I've noticed on my live scope that when you throw those real big ones out there, you might catch the biggest fish in the school, but you're going to spook the rest of the school and not be able to catch any of the other ones. And I've seen that so many times that I've started to go and downsize and notice that I can catch the big one in the school and I don't spook as many of the fish in the school as you normally would, because they're usually pretty tight on that offshore structure. So it's a blast, man. You that thing's falling down, and all of a sudden you just feel ka-dunk, and the slack in the line disappears. Now the rod that I'm going to fish is going to be a medium heavy fast rod. I love fishing these things, but they are super heavy, and if you throw them on a medium heavy moderate rod, you're not going to get a good enough hook set. So I'm going to throw them on my jig rod, 7'3", 7'4", medium heavy. If I'm throwing the bigger one, sometimes I'll throw it on a heavy power rod, but if I have 20-pound test fluorocarbon on there, it tends to funk up the action a little bit, and you just don't get as good enough action. So I'm going to go to a medium heavy fast. The line's going to be 17-pound or 15-pound test fluorocarbon, usually 15, and then the reel's going to be a high-speed reel. I want the fastest reel that I can put on that rod to be able to catch up to that slack line as you're fishing it, and you'll know what I'm talking about when you try it. But like I said, the videos are up there. I just love this technique, especially for catching giants on ledges. It's just so much fun. You know, back in the day I used to stroke a jig, and then the flutter spoon came out, and I was just like, this is so much fun to fish. I don't know what else to say. It's just a great bait. But guys, that's the baits for the month of July. But like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out in the water, go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. We'll see you.